Since the Reserve Mining Company began production in 1955 to when they were called to court in 1972, they were dumping up to 67,000 tons of taconite tailings into Lake Superior per day. The human carcinogens found in said tailings threatened both the lives of thousands of people in the Silver Bay area and their right to clean air and drinking water. Reserve had a responsibility to mitigate, if not eliminate, the threat their pollution had caused. As a result of the ruling in United States of America versus Reserve Mining Company, a tailings pond was created on land, but issues continue even today. In the wake of the Great Depression, the Mesabi Iron Range struggled under the weight of new financial issues. Their profits and easy iron supply was running low. In the midst of this, Professor E.W. Davis of the University of Minnesota was constructing a new process, one that involved taconite, a low-grade iron ore, being turned solely into iron. This in turn would create hundreds of new jobs. By 1947, Armco Steel and Republic Steel headed the Reserve Mining Company in Babbitt as a full-scale operation in the eyes of the state. That same year, they received a permit from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to begin the actual mining process. The chosen location for the plant was on the coast of Lake Superior. This area, or Silver Bay as it would come to be called, lay 47 miles from Babbitt. This stretch would be covered by a railroad transporting the taconite balls. Silver Bay's location was vital to the mine's operation. The amount of waste the plant produced in a single day exceeded well over 60,000 tons daily. They needed a place to get rid of it. They chose Lake Superior. The waste would travel from Silver Bay through two chutes overlooking the water and into the waves below. As the years went by, Reserve Mining had turned small Silver Bay into a booming industrial town. The residents in both Silver Bay and Babbitt were primarily Reserve workers, and their livelihood depended on the company. Luckily, the iron ore business had picked up. In 1965, Reserve produced a gross production of nearly 30 million tons, which was then a world record. However, people were beginning to worry. Arlene Lado, whose family ran a casino in Silver Bay, commented on the change that had occurred in a mere 11 years. The boulders she once had no problem spotting 15 feet under the water were no longer visible. She, along with many others, were alarmed. This pollution, described as green goo, spread across hundreds of miles, from Two Harbors to Duluth. Fishermen noticed a reduced amount of fish in their nets, and even the nets themselves were covered in a grayish slime. A delta was beginning to form around the disposal site, growing larger as more waste spewed into the water. The issue only gained more attention from there. A 1968 investigation conducted by the Department of the Interior concluded, quote, that the Reserve Mining Company discharged more sediments into Lake Superior in 12 days than all the lake's tributaries discharged into it in an entire year. Charles Stoddard, then the regional coordinator for the Department of the Interior, brought their findings up to Congressman Blatnick, who refused the case, saying that only a year's worth of findings was not conclusive. But now the newly formed Environmental Protection Agency got involved. Citing a section of the Federal Water Pollution Control Act, they found that the Reserve Mining Company was, quote, violating federally approved water quality standards. Not only was the dumping impacting Minnesotan waters, but Wisconsin waters as well. This was now a multi-state issue. Reserve was given 180 days to come up with an acceptable alternative to their current taconite tailing disposal. If they did not comply, they faced possible court action. The Department of Justice filed a complaint titled United States of America versus Reserve Mining Company on February 17, 1972 with the United States District Court from the District of Minnesota. Despite calling for the case in the first place, the EPA held no hope that they would win. They didn't believe that their case against Reserve was strong enough. Up until this point, the EPA had made their case purely on the ecological impact of the taconite tailings in Lake Superior. Philip Cook, however, discovered something that would be a turning point for the entire case. He connected the Cummingtonite grunerite to a study by a medical researcher based in Mount Sinai Hospital, who would discover that the mineral was a carcinogen. The taconite tailings in Lake Superior could cause cancer, both through airborne particles and from ingestion. Thus began the public health case. The trial began in August 1973. Reserve's lawyers and witnesses struggled to get through their segments without falling to cross-examination from the plaintiff. 5 months later, Reserve Mining rested its public health case. In February, Judge Lord stated, quote, that Reserve has offered nothing that has weakened or rebutted the testimony of the government's experts on the health issue insofar as I, a finder of fact, am concerned. The other issue at hand was the possible on-land disposal site. Reserve was still stating that there was no other option but the deep pipe, which involved carrying the tailings to the bottom of Lake Superior. On-land disposal was impossible. But Judge Lord had his suspicions. He had a plaintiff officer subpoena Armco Steel and Republic Steel records. In those files, it was apparent that the corporations had been encouraged to resort to on-land disposal, and had even discouraged the deep pipe method on account of, quote, technical and economic feasibility. Judge Lord already held quite a bit of contempt for Armco and Republic, 9 months of it to be exact, and this did them no favors. Soon after, Reserve, Armco, and Republic all agreed to figure out a settlement deal with the plaintiffs, but weeks later the defendants still had no desire to comply with the best air pollution technology. The settlement idea was dropped. Judge Lord took it into his own hands. He met with Reserve's chairman, C. William Verity, on April 20, 1974, and concluded that Reserve had only been stalling negotiations for its own benefit. Lord gave Verity the lunch hour to adhere to the requirements of both the Air Pollution Control Regulation and the State Department of Natural Resources. Verity's response was that Reserve would do neither. He doubled down and stated that, quote, it is our considered judgment that Reserve's discharges do not constitute a health hazard. That same day, Judge Lord finalized his opinion with actions to begin just after midnight that night. The memorandum stated simply, 1. That the discharge from the Reserve Mining Company into Lake Superior be enjoined as of 12:01 a.m., April 21, 1974. 2. That the discharge of amphibole fibers from the Reserve Mining Company into the air be enjoined as of 12:01 a.m., April 21, 1974, until such time as defendants prove to the court that they are in compliance with all applicable Minnesota regulations, including but not limited to APC 17. The day after, the Reserve Mining Company shut its doors. The 2 chutes overlooking the Taconite Delta lay bare, and 3,000 people were out of work. Only 2 days after Judge Lord's decision, Armco, Republic, and Reserve asked the judge to stay his order. When his answer was a resolute no, the lawyers turned instead to the U.S. Court of Appeals for a stay. The 3 judges agreed to the stay in March 1975. They didn't believe there was enough proof of the health risks to completely end Reserve's production. 5 years later, Reserve was officially given the final deal by the Federal District Court in Minneapolis. Either they take responsibility to stop dumping the taconite tailings in Lake Superior and dispose on the new on-land site named Milepost 7, or they end business in April 1980. They began construction that summer. 7 miles out from Silver Bay, a new 5.8 square mile area was readied for construction of the tailings basin. Despite multiple cost setbacks, Reserve Mining recommenced partial operation in early June 1980, calling back 500 employees after putting nearly 1,400 people out of work for a 3-month shutdown period. Newspapers from the time described the tense atmosphere, saying, quote, residents in those communities say they have worried for years that Reserve would close instead of building the on-land disposal system, spelling economic disaster for the area. Even so, there was still ongoing debate between environmentalists and Reserve Mining. The former believed the company to have dragged its feet, while the latter still claimed to have done nothing wrong at all. No one has ever shown yet that Reserve's use of Lake Superior has caused any health problems, was Donald Wright's response, the director of communication for Reserve. Even today, with proven risk to public rights to clean air and water, Reserve Mining Company, now North Shore Mining under the ownership of Cleveland Cliffs, vacillates on their responsibility to the public. In 2022, the Minnesota Center for Environmental Advocacy discovered a federal notice for an expansion proposal of Milepost 7. The document outlines a, quote, 40% increase in the basin's surface area. The public was never given this information. In the past month, the U.S. Appeals Court has demanded an environmental impact statement for the 750-acre expansion. It's still not clear whether the DNR will approach the Supreme Court on the issue. For decades, United States of America versus Reserve Mining Company dominated the popular media across Minnesota. It sparked a new era of environmentalism, and it called for extreme change in the way big businesses handled their pollution. Through the efforts of everyday citizens who simply cared for their rights, Lake Superior continues to supply clean drinking water to thousands of people. Environmentalist monitoring of the tailing pond safely continues.